They thought replacing my plow crew would save money. Instead, they froze an entire neighborhood, locked themselves in, and learned the hard way why no one touches snow contracts midwinter. By the time they started screaming for help, it was already too late. I've been running snowplows in this county for almost 16 years. Long enough to know that winter isn't just weather here, it's infrastructure. Roads aren't convenience. They're survival. When snow stacks up the wrong way, people don't just get late. They get stranded. They lose heat. They miss dialysis. They wait for ambulances that can't reach them. That's why my company exists. We don't do flashy branding or marketing videos. We do logistics. We clear hospital routes first, then school access roads, then emergency loops, then private contracts, in that exact order. Every storm, same system. No shortcuts. One of those private contracts was with a gated HOA community called Ridgeview Summit. High elevation. Steep roads. Long cul-de-sacs. Expensive homes built by people who liked the idea of mountain living more than the reality. They'd been my client for over a decade. Never missed a storm. Never had a complaint that actually mattered. Until they elected a new HOA president. Her first email came in late September. Polite on the surface, sharp underneath. She wanted to reevaluate service priorities and modernize winter operations. Corporate words. Red flags. People who talk like that usually don't understand what they're managing. I replied professionally. Explained our routes, our legal obligations to the county, and why emergency access always comes first. She didn't like that answer. A week later, she showed up at my yard in an SUV that had never seen a gravel road. Looked around at the trucks, the salt piles, the fuel tanks, like she was touring a factory. Then she said something I'll never forget. Snow removal shouldn't look so industrial. I told her snow doesn't care how it looks. She laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. After that, the complaints started trickling in. Plows were too loud. Salt was damaging landscaping. Trucks were operating at inconvenient hours. They wanted later plowing, lighter clearing, prettier results. I documented everything. Every call. Every email. Because when someone starts pushing boundaries, you don't argue, you prepare. Then came the letter. Not notarized. Not written by a lawyer. Just HOA letterhead and a lot of buzzwords. They claimed my company was being terminated for failure to align with evolving community standards. Translation: I wouldn't bend the laws of physics to make snow quiet. I wasn't surprised. I was curious. Because snow contracts aren't gym memberships. You don't just cancel them mid-season without consequences. Especially not in a county where I held the primary emergency coordination agreement. So I did exactly what experience taught me to do. I stepped back. Calmly. Legally. 2 days later, Ridgeview Summit sent out a community-wide announcement. They'd hired a new snow service provider. Promised faster response, cleaner aesthetics, innovative techniques. I looked up the company name. It didn't exist. No registration. No license. No insurance on file. Just a vague website with stock photos and a phone number that went straight to voicemail. Whoever they hired wasn't just inexperienced, they were imaginary. I considered warning them publicly. Calling the county. Blowing it up early. But then I checked the forecast. A major system was moving in. Not a dusting. Not a mild storm. A multi-day event with heavy accumulation and high winds. The kind that shuts down highways and breaks weak plans in half. So instead of fighting, I waited. The night before the storm, my crews were staged and ready. Trucks fueled. Blades checked. Radios tested. We were set to run continuous rotations for 72 hours if needed. Meanwhile, Ridgeview Summit locked their gates. Brand new electronic gates, installed fast. Access restricted to their approved contractor. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just replacing me, they were trying to cut me out completely. At 2 a.m., the snow started falling sideways. By 4 a.m., visibility was down to nothing. We rolled anyway. Hospital routes first. Then the fire station loop. Then the school district access roads. Same system as always. Every road cleared except one. The long private drive up to Ridgeview Summit. We didn't touch it. Not out of spite. Out of law. By mid-morning, the storm had buried their entrance. The gate keypad was iced over. No plow tracks inside. No tire movement. Just untouched snow piling higher by the hour. That's when my phone started buzzing. First from residents. Then board members. Then the HOA president herself. Messages stacked up fast. Where are the plows? People can't get out. Our contractor isn't responding. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't authorized. And the moment you cross that line, you inherit all the liability they created. By sunset, the snow was deep enough to swallow mailboxes. Cars were trapped in driveways. Heating systems were straining. Power flickered in parts of the development. Still no plow. Their replacement never showed. And that's when the tone changed. The email stopped sounding confident. The call stopped sounding demanding. Panic started leaking through the words. They weren't asking about aesthetics anymore. They were asking about access. But winter doesn't renegotiate. And neither does paperwork. That night, I stood on my porch listening to the wind drag snow across the valley like sandpaper. Trucks idling in the yard behind me, ready to move. Crews waiting for the next call. I knew what was coming. And I also knew this was only the beginning. Because the moment an HOA cuts off its own access during a major storm, it's no longer a snow problem. It's a crisis. And by morning, Ridgeview Summit was about to find out what that really meant. By morning, Ridgeview Summit was no longer quiet. The storm hadn't stopped, it had settled in. Snow kept falling in thick, heavy sheets, piling onto what was already there. Drifts pushed against doors. Wind-carved trenches where driveways used to be. From the highway below, the neighborhood looked like it had simply vanished. At 6:12 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, I answered. The HOA president didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. Her voice was tight, clipped, trying to sound controlled and failing. We need you up here. Now. I told her calmly that her board had terminated our contract. That the gates were locked. That we were not authorized to enter private property without written clearance. She said, people are trapped. I said, then you should contact your contractor. Silence. Then she asked, can't you just make an exception? That was the moment. Not the storm. Not the snow. The moment when authority realized it had none. I told her the truth, the same thing I tell everyone who pushes past the line. If I enter without authorization, your HOA becomes my liability. I won't do that to my crew. She hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time from a board member. Apologetic tone. Soft language. Talking about temporary reinstatement and good faith. I asked one question. Is the gate open? No. I said I'd need a written notice restoring the contract, county acknowledgement, and emergency access clearance. Because at that point, this wasn't routine service anymore. While they scrambled, the situation inside Ridgeview Summit deteriorated fast. Residents tried to shovel their way out. Gave up after an hour. Snow was too deep, too heavy. One guy tried to drive anyway, got stuck sideways, blocking the only internal road. Then the power went out. That's when the real panic started. I found out later that they held an emergency HOA meeting over speakerphone. People shouting. Accusations flying. Someone demanded to know who hired the replacement company. Someone else demanded names. The HOA president tried to blame me. She told residents I was refusing service out of spite. That lasted until screenshots started circulating. Emails. Termination letters. The announcement about the new contractor. The fake website. Truth has a way of cutting through snow. Around noon, the county emergency coordinator called me directly. He'd seen this movie before. Are you cleared to access Ridgeview Summit? No. Do you have equipment available? Yes. Stand by. An hour later, the call came back. Emergency access authorized. HOA authority suspended temporarily. County assuming control for life safety operations only. That changed everything. We rolled within minutes. Gates were forced open. Literally cut. We led with our heaviest plow, chains on, lights blazing, pushing through snow that hadn't been touched since the first flake fell. Inside, it was chaos. Cars buried. Residents standing outside in boots and blankets. One woman crying because she hadn't been able to get her father's medication delivered. Another guy shouting into his phone, blaming anyone who'd listen. We didn't engage. We cleared. Main road first. Emergency loop second. Driveways last. An ambulance arrived while we were still pushing snow. Stuck halfway up the hill until we cut a wider path. That's when it really hit the residents. This wasn't about convenience. This was about access. By evening, the roads were open enough for emergency vehicles. Power crews followed. Then utility trucks. Then the calm started to return. The HOA president was nowhere to be seen. The next day, the county held a review. HOA board members attended. Residents attended. I attended remotely. The findings were simple. They terminated a licensed, insured contractor during winter without replacement verification. Locked emergency access. Misrepresented service availability to residents. The president resigned that afternoon. The board issued a public apology. Not to me, to the residents. A week later, Ridgeview Summit reinstated my company under stricter oversight. Higher cost. Emergency clauses they couldn't waive. Gates permanently accessible during storms. No negotiation. The residents didn't argue. They'd learned something important. Snow doesn't care about budgets. Emergencies don't respect authority. And competence isn't something you can replace with a cheaper line item. The next storm came 2 weeks later. We cleared Ridgeview Summit first. Not because they were special, but because they were vulnerable. When my lead driver radioed and that the roads were clean, I looked at the forecast and smiled. Winter was still coming. This time, they were ready.